Welcome to Not a Life Sentence, where we explore the idea that life's challenges are not a life sentence. Have you ever felt stuck or overwhelmed? Well, you're not alone. I'm Carla Kazan Berbari, your host. On this podcast, we dive deep into topics that challenge the notion of permanence, proving that even the toughest situations are not a life sentence. I will be joined by guests, experts in the field, and people with lived experiences who will share their inspiring journey of overcoming adversity. We'll also explore practical strategies to navigate life's challenges and come out stronger on the other side. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not a Life Sentence. My guest today is a US brand strategist who worked in advertising with companies like Unilever, IBM, Kodak, to name a few. He then left advertising and launched his own company, working with early startups, and last year started his Boost solo business, working with solopreneurs. Nikhil Vaish, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well, Carla. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Nikhil, for my audience, can you please introduce yourself? What do you do and who do you serve and support?
Sure. So yeah, my background, as you mentioned, is in brand building and marketing. I worked at large agencies like Lintas in India, Emirati in London, Ogilvy and Publicis in New York, and across both business to business and consumer brands like IBM, Cadbury's, Unilever, Kodak, Citigroup. And then in 2008, I just kind of felt like the ad industry was not keeping pace with the rate of change. And I also felt like my learning curve was going the wrong way. So I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone and do something that, scared the hell out of me. And I looked around, it was a lot of the same old, and then I started chatting with an old college buddy of mine who was in technology. He was a really smart CTO, and we started talking about starting a company. So I went out and did a little consulting with some development shops, and just sort of this idea sort of took birth talking to him, working with these shops, and we felt like we could create a good marriage of idea and execution. So it's like I met a lot of these smart young people who were sort of really good at building things, but didn't necessarily know who or why they were building it for, right? Yeah. So that was sort of the marriage of ideas, if you like. And that's the company we started, working with early stage startups. And of course, our dream was to bring really early stage startups to market. I'm talking pre-seed. But of course, we learned the hard way that's a bad business plan because they can only pay you in equity. And as hard as I tried, I couldn't pay my electricity bills with equity. So that didn't work that well. But, we work with some really cool early stage companies. I would help them build a business plan, go pitch friends, family, investors. And the ones that could cobble together money, the guys would then build out their e-commerce platforms, their apps, whatever they needed. And during that time, we actually stumbled onto our own thing. There was no way to search streaming services. So you had Google, Google hadn't launched, you had Apple, you had Netflix, and you had Amazon, basically. And there was no way to search them. Google didn't have the capability. So we were starting to get really frustrated, and we built a tool for ourselves called Can I Stream It? And the next thing you know, people were like, New Yorker, TechCrunch, Gizmodo, everybody's like, oh my God, this thing is amazing. So we realized we'd hit a pain point. Started to build out that business. I went and got agreements with Comcast, and that sort of got the ball rolling. And then within 2 years, we had an exclusive with Netflix, which gave us a lot of false bravado. And we were like, okay, we can do this on our own. We don't need investors. And we gave it a good run, 5 years. We had good we were self-funded. But then after that, it became just too hard to compete with the big guys when everybody got into the space, right? Yeah. So we finally wound it up, and around 2015, around the same time, my business partner and I just kind of felt we were going separate ways. So I left and started consulting, which I did for almost a decade. That brought me to last year, as you said, actually, Boost Solo is now almost a year old. April this year will be a year old. And that I launched that company about a year and a half ago. And we can talk about that maybe separately, because that was born out of a real world pain.
Right. And yes, we are going to come back to Boost Solo, but just for chronological order, sort of, during COVID, you had a consulting business and work was really booming until 2022. What happened?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as we alluded to a minute ago, everything was great, and I don't know what happened in 2022. I mean, it's hard to know because there's so many factors beyond your control. But I had built up a good body of business, right? Repeat clients, agencies that I work with, and that had sort of sustained me. And then in 2022, it just, I don't know what I say, the tectonic plates of my business shifted, and all those sources of revenue dried up. And I'd always told my wife that, at some point, if this thing doesn't work out on my own, I'll go back to the corporate world. Easy peasy, right?
Sure.
And I tried. So in 2022, 2023, almost the whole year, I applied to maybe 100 jobs, got one interview. And I realized something was wrong there. And obviously it batters your self-confidence. That is inevitable. But also I realized something was strange was happening. And in my mind, I hadn't realized I had turned 50. And that is sort of like a death knell almost in the corporate world, right? So I realized I'd hit the ageism window. Right. And my resumes were not even getting to human beings. So I realized that was going to be futile. So I could sit and cry about the state of the world and how unfair it was, or I could pivot.
Yeah.
And since I've been on this journey as a solopreneur before this word was invented, I realized that this was a really growing audience, and perhaps the pandemic sparked it, right? There was a massive rise in people starting their own businesses out of necessity during that time, and also out of the fact that technology now has enabled you to do that really easily from your own home. You don't you could be a fitness instructor without needing a gym. There's so many things you could do that the pandemic sort of shone a light on, if you like, out of necessity. Yeah. So there was a massive rise in solopreneurship, and I saw this as an underserved audience. It's a journey I'm still on, and I wanted to serve this audience. And I realized there aren't any great solutions out there that were serving this niche in a way I believe they need to be served. And that's how Boost Solo was born.
Right. And what is it?
Okay, so it's basically, as the name says, to boost solopreneurs. So the thing a lot of solopreneurs and like myself struggle with is standing out in crowded markets. Now, most people understand the expertise they have and what they're good at, but they have a hard time articulating that to the right audience. So that's where Boost Solo comes in, right? So I've taken my 30 years of brand building expertise, and I've basically created a 9-week guided coaching program to help you build the muscles, to help you articulate that expertise to the right niche audience, which is critical. And that and it's really about telling your story, right? That's what it's about. As a solopreneur, you are the brand. So once you can start articulating your expertise, your story to the right audience, you'll suddenly start to see client growth, loyalty, charging a premium, all these things start to happen. So that's what Boost Solo is designed to do. Brand Boost is the signature course that I've built to do that.
Right. Solopreneurs, is it a new term? Because just, in the last maybe decade or just under a decade, we've been hearing it. Before it was startups. What is the difference?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And in my mind, there is a distinction, right? So yes, the term is new. And I think today we live in an age where everything needs a hashtag. So that's probably why it was born. Right. But to me, the traditional entrepreneur, and it's funny to say traditional because they're not that old, but traditional entrepreneurs are the ones who go and look for capital. They're looking to build a company. They're looking to hire people. They're looking to get investment. And most of them want to become unicorns. To me, the solopreneur is on a very different path. They're not looking to become unicorns. They're not even going to look for VC money. All they're doing is taking an expertise that they have or a skill that they have and bringing in a paycheck in lieu of a corporate paycheck, right? So they want to create a sustainable revenue stream that doesn't require them working for a corporation.
Yep.
So that's a fundamental difference to me. And also, therefore, it's probably a much lonelier journey than the traditional entrepreneur.
And that's where your Boost Solo coaching business comes into play, because it is very isolating.
Yeah, and absolutely. So the first part is establishing yourself, getting to the right audience and getting sales. The second part then, yes, and you sort of preempted this idea that Boost Solo, ultimately I want to build a community under it, right? That's what's going to be the foundation of Boost Solo, is a community of solopreneurs who come together, who can support each other, who can help each other, and who can sort of enlighten each other, if you like.
You must have met and supported a lot of solopreneurs and being one yourself. What do they all have in common?
Well, I think they have a seed. I've also launched a podcast to tell solopreneur stories. So I've actually had about 20 conversations now, digging into exactly this. And what I found unscientific is that they all seem to have a seed, which has been there either since childhood or somewhere earlier in the thing, where even if they spent their entire life in the corporate world, they've always wanted to go and build something, start something, do something on their own. That's one. The second is, a lot of people feel that way, but a lot of people don't make the leap because they're always waiting for the perfect time. In fact, today I was in a solopreneur forum and there were these two gentlemen we were speaking to, and they were both struggling with like, I want to go on, I build my own company, but I don't want to give up the paycheck. I don't know how to do it because as long as I'm stuck with a corporation, I can't scale. I can't really focus on my business, but I don't want to work here anymore. So it's also, at some point, you just have to take the leap, right? So I think that's the second trait, is taking, you can do it smartly. I'm not saying just go blindly and do it, but at some point you will have to cut that cord and leap without the parachute and have enough faith that you'll be able to figure out how to land, right? So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing is they love to learn, because you have to wear 100 different hats as a solopreneur. Like you said, we were talking earlier before we started recording, there is no IT department, there is no marketing department, there is no sales department, there is no any department. You are everybody. You don't have to be an expert in all of those areas, but you absolutely have to have competence to enough understanding and knowledge to be able to run a business, right? And understand those various different aspects. Like my podcasts, I don't edit them. I've hired an editor to do that. So the way I think about it is, which are the skills that are going to help me grow my business? So I'm learning how to build CRM workflows and automations, because that is something that's useful to me and I need. Right? But editing, building websites, these are not services I'm going to offer. These are not skills I need to put into my arsenal. So that's the way I think about it. So I say outsource everything, but you still need to learn and constantly be learning because things change quickly. So I think those are the three things.
Right. And definitely patience
Yes.
To learn all of these things.
Yeah. Well, that we have to, I don't think any of us are patient, but yes, meditation helps with that.
True. You also mentioned that we all need angels, and we also need those that tell us things as they are. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on this? And can we handle the truth?
Yeah, you reminded me of a show I just watched where this guy recites the whole "a few good men" line that Jack Nicholson utters in a really sort of bad monologue. But anyway, it's just funny. But yes, I think you have to learn how to handle the truth, right? On two levels. So I'll come back to the angels, but I think the first thing is, and this is the other thing a lot of people struggle with, is sort of when you're working for a company, rejection is very different because they're rejecting the Apple brand or the IBM solution. It's not you. But when you're a solopreneur, you immediately feel like they're rejecting you, even though that's not true. It feels that way because there's nothing in between you and what you're selling, right? It is your service or your baby. So I think, yes, so that is one level of truth you have to sort of get used to, which is it's not about you and you're not being rejected. You probably don't have the right customer or the right niche that you're targeting, most likely. But the truth and the angels, so where they come in is, I always say, yes, you need two types, right? The one angel on your shoulder, which is not investors, not angel investors, but the people who are, unconditional support. Every time you fall down, every time you're sort of lying on the ground, you've been punched in the gut, these people will be there and saying, you can do this. We know, we have faith in you. We believe in you. You can get through this. And it's unconditional. It's sort of blind, right? You need those. But you also need the truth tellers. And funny enough, I spoke to one today. I'm building a scope for a technology project. And I reached out to him because he's been CEO of companies. And I said, bring out your red pen and go through my scope and just blow holes in it, right? So, and he did. And there was so much stuff. And I was like, oh my God, yes. And of course it's your baby and you're sitting there. There's a little bit of you suddenly feel like you're back to grade school again. where the teachers got their red pen out and you're kind of sitting there like all bummed, like, I thought that was really good. But, ultimately you realize that you're doing this to grow, to learn, and it's going to help you, right? So you sort of suck it up and you deal with it. And that's why I think the truth tellers are equally important, and you need both. It's not one or the other. And at least for me, I haven't found them to be the same people. If you're really lucky,
Right.
maybe you will. But for me, they are different people.
Yeah. So then where does ego come into play, or how does it come into play? Because for you to start your own business, you would need some form of ego, but then you don't need a very big ego. Otherwise, it is going to stop you from accepting the feedback. How do you balance it?
So yeah, it's a really interesting question. So you do need ego because obviously this is like, a lot of people like my parents were like, what is wrong with you? Like
Yeah.
you're giving up such a good job and security and like to go and do this thing, which is, what is it? Without any support, without any of this thing. So yes, you need ego to have faith in taking the leap, but also in what you're offering, right? I think that's important. So that's where I put my ego, is in building my solution and offering the best service I can to my clients. I've managed to sort of start to separate the fact that of rejection, right? It doesn't bother me because it's like, okay, either the offer was wrong or I talked to the wrong person or they're not ready, right? So I think you have to learn that. And people often tell me, but what if you find people who don't believe in building a brand? I'm like, well, then they're not my client, right?
Yep, true.
You
Makes
have to
sense.
find the people when they're ready for your solution. Until then, you plant seeds. So that's the way I think about it now, is like, of course, I've been through that journey, and it's not to say that my ego's never hurt. Of course it is. We're all human. But I'm able to now just sort of like take a breath and say, okay, let's go back and figure out what was working, what wasn't working, and fix it for the next one.
What's one mistake you see solopreneurs make, and how can they fix it?
So I think the biggest one is trying to do everything themselves, right? So going back to what I was saying earlier, the differentiation I make is, you have to learn certain things, but start to determine, like consciously sit down and say, okay, is this skill of value to me in building and growing my business versus just a skill that I'm going to add to do work, right?
Yeah.
So if it's not contributing to bringing in clients, to building client loyalty, to driving sales, then outsource it. That's what I would say. So I think, and that's the mistake I've seen a lot make, is like, and also going down a rabbit hole, right? Because like, CRM workflows are so much fun. I never thought I would say fun and CRM workflows in the same sentence. But literally a month ago, if you'd asked me, I would have been like, ugh, much fun. But the thing is, you can also get lost in, like even creating social media content, like, creating videos. You could spend days editing it and adding effects and stuff, but you're not doing anything to further your business. So I think you have to start getting really, conscious about auditing the things that add value in terms of growing your business. And I always say it's working on your business versus working in your business, right?
Your business.
That's the way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we need really to establish where the investment needs to go.
Exactly. And time is your most precious commodity, right?
Yeah.
As a solopreneur. Well, as most people, but especially as a solopreneur.
Especially true. What is the best piece of advice you have received about running a business?
Well, I think the best piece of advice, not necessarily linked to running a business, but something my father told me years ago when I was facing a really difficult situation in the corporate world. And I was mad. I was like, I'm ready to quit. I've had it. And he was like, son, just do me a favor, sleep on it. And I was like, what? I've made up my mind. He's like, I know, sleep on it. And if in the morning you feel the same way, go ahead and do it. But all I ask you to do is spend one night sleeping on it. And that was the most valuable piece of advice I've learned. And I think it's got even more value in our constantly 24/7 reactionary social media driven world, right? Where people don't stop to think before responding anymore. And I think that's the most beautiful advice, because in the moment, our brains are clouded. Our emotions are overriding our practical, even keel, logical decision-making process, and we make bad decisions 9 times out of 10. So that, I think, is the most valuable advice, and I use it every day in my business, right? I sleep on it.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the ego, everything, you sleep on it. You're like, you get bad, something bad happens, sleep on it. And like you said, if you still feel the same as strongly the next day, then act on it. That's fine, because then you've spent time, you've let your brain digest, you've sort of taken in the information, you've made your decision-making process is not as clouded after 24 hours as it is in the moment. So
Yeah, a very wise advice. And it was good that you did take it on board.
yeah, I mean, well, it took me. I'm in my 50s now, so we learn our lessons slowly. But yes, I did ultimately take it on board. I can't say I always did, but I have now fully ingested
See,
it.
some things get better with age,
Touche, yes. I think we all do.
of course. What is one thing every solopreneur should start doing immediately?
I think it is connecting and finding their community.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And it doesn't matter if it's your angels, your truth tellers, your ex-colleagues, your friends. Just find. I mean, ideally, yes, look for other solopreneurs. And there are a lot of solopreneur communities out there right now. I mean, obviously, I'll say Boost Solo is going to be one later this year, but there are a bunch of other communities. Start to build that support system immediately, because the days are long. The journey, as you said, requires a lot of patience, and there are lots of downs and some ups. And then before there are lots of ups, right? So it takes time. So that's what I would say, is find that support system. And solopreneurs are incredibly generous people. Like I had one yesterday who competes with me in terms of solution, and she sent me one of her clients to talk to me, and that's not unusual in the solopreneur community.
Lovely. Nikhil, where can people learn more about your work and connect with you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn, and Nikhil Vaish on LinkedIn. And also my website is a temporary landing page right now, boostsolo.com. Will be fully live in about a week.
Awesome. Nikesh, thank you so much for making the time to speak to me. You have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Carla. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for letting me share my story with your audience.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on Not a Life Sentence podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. Stay tuned for more discussions on topics that matter. I'd be grateful if you could take a few seconds to leave me a positive review. It's a simple process, and your feedback could make a big difference. Until next time, remember, nothing is a life sentence.